Good morning and welcome back to day one of NWR's Virtual Investor Conference, Series 11. My name is Max Son and I will be your host for today. Up next this morning, we have Chimeric Therapeutics. Chimeric is developing groundbreaking CAR T cell therapies for solid tumor based on scientific research conducted by leading US CAR T experts. This morning, we have Chimeric CEO Jennifer Chow presenting. A reminder, if you would like to ask a question throughout the session, please do so via the Q&A function on Zoom, and we will endeavour to have these questions answered at the end of the session. Jennifer, I'll now hand it over to you.
Thanks, Max. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I hope that I will be able to provide a little bit of update for those of you that know as well, and some information for those of you that were new too. Chimeric Therapeutics is a clinical stage cell therapy company, and we have an incredibly exciting overall investment offer at the moment. We have multiple assets with positive phase 1 clinical signals. So both our Chlortoxin CAR T as well as our Chimeric program have already shown positive phase 1 clinical signals. We have an innovative and diversified portfolio with next generation technologies. We currently have 7 assets in our portfolio, and we've had incredible recognition from the scientific community where our CDH17 CAR T was highlighted in Nature Cancer and our Chlortoxin CAR T in Science Translational Medicine. We have robust clinical development. We have 4 planned clinical programs for 2022 and 8 by 2023. With development across 10 different tumor areas for extensive opportunity in the long term. And we have an industry-leading team with the experience to drive seamless development. A team that's worked on 4 out of the 5 approved FDA CAR T therapies, alongside world-renowned clinical and scientific partners and advisors. Our investment snapshot as of Friday. So we're currently traded as CHM, and the listed option is traded as CHMO. Unfortunately, we've seen a reduction very much in line with the rest of the biotech market, and we certainly believe that that doesn't reflect what Chimeric Therapeutics has to offer. Our portfolio, as I mentioned, has 7 different assets in development, and you can see the extensive preclinical and clinical plans that we have highlighted here. So we believe that where we sit from a share price perspective right now, not only doesn't reflect where we are, but it certainly doesn't reflect our portfolio and our pipeline as well. For us, as we look at how 2022 has begun, we've managed to actually achieve an incredible amount in the first 4 months. We've had positive clinical data in our glioblastoma trial. We've had positive clinical data in our Chimeric K trial, a Nature Cancer publication with our CDH17 CAR T, and we've initiated the 3rd dose cohort in our Chlortoxin trial. We've set up 2 very important partnerships that I'll actually take a few minutes to talk about this morning with WuXi and Be The Match Biotherapies. We've had an important cellular immunotherapy advisory board meeting to really lean into the expert recommendations from the clinical advisors that we have. And we've added people with cell therapy experience talent in areas that like quality and clinical operations, where we really needed to bring about expertise to keep us driving forward quickly. So I'll start with Chlortoxin and just highlight where we are with Chlortoxin. For those of you that are new to Chimeric, Chlortoxin is a first-in-class CAR T cell therapy. And it is developed from Chlortoxin, which is 36 amino acid peptide derived from Deathstalker scorpion venom. Preclinical activity was very, very promising. We showed very strong activity and broad recognition and binding. But importantly, Chlortoxin is already in a phase 1 clinical trial. It's a 4 dose level trial with 2 routes of administration, with the Chlortoxin CAR T cells being administered directly into a patient's brain. We're currently enrolling and recruiting patients in dose level 3. What we've seen to date is data from dose level 1 and 2, and this really just highlights the data we've seen so far. From a safety perspective, we've seen no dose-limiting toxicities and that chlortoxin has been generally well tolerated by all patients. From an efficacy perspective, we've seen local disease stability in over 70% of the evaluable patients, something really incredible at the very low dose levels, dose level 1 and 2 we're offering patients. And we very importantly for CAR T cell therapy seen bioactivity, which is the persistence of cells. So when the cells are actually being infused into a patient's brain, they're staying alive to be able to do their job. So really encouraging phase 1 data has already started to come about in chlortoxin. When we look at the development of chlortoxin in a recurrent or progressive glioblastoma setting, we can look at some of the analogs of what's going on or what has happened and what's available to patients. And what we see is that there is an incredible unmet need for better therapies for these patients. There's only 4 currently approved therapies, and you can see from the table below that they offer patients an objective response rate below 25%, somewhere between 10 and 25%. And certainly as we're sitting with 70% disease stability in patients already, we're really optimistic that we're going to be able to do more for patients as we go forward. And you can certainly see that we're highlighting the market size. And right now the market is about a $2.2 billion global market in glioblastoma. With the expectation with new therapies coming on the market, this market will grow quickly to a $4.2 billion market. One of the things that we've been really focusing on at the end of last year and this year is manufacturing and manufacturing readiness. So right now, our chlortoxin clinical trial is actually being done at City of Hope Hospital in California. And what happens there is you essentially have the patient come in. The patient is apheresed, and that really just means that we're taking blood from the patient so that we can take that blood and we can send it off to our manufacturing facility. So that blood can have the chimeric antigen receptor inserted, the cells can be expanded, and then the CAR T cells are frozen and returned to a patient to be infused. Now, when all of this is happening in one facility, like it currently is at City of Hope Hospital, this is actually relatively easy because you're walking things down a hallway, or at worst, you might be walking them from one building to the next. But the challenge with having manufacturing for CAR T cell therapies in one center is that there are limited capabilities and limited capacities. So when you start to think about wanting to operate larger clinical trials, or if you want to start to think about getting ready for eventual commercial indications, you know that you can't possibly be able to continue to develop your therapies in an academic hospital setting because you just don't have the infrastructure necessary. So what we've really been doing is focusing on making sure that we have infrastructure in place. As you start to think about opening out or expanding a trial or getting ready for commercialization, you start to think about having a much bigger manufacturing facility that has all of the capabilities and capacities that you're going to require to treat multiple patients at the same time and meet all of the demanding requirements that the regulatory agencies have around these therapies. How this changes everything, though, is when you have a big manufacturing facility that can support larger clinical trials, you suddenly have to start thinking about other things, other infrastructure needs. And so what you suddenly have to start to think about is if you have 3 different patients, for example, and they're all coming from different hospitals, they all get leukapheresed in their own local hospital. Now what? Well, their cells get frozen or they get put on ice. And now you need to get those cells to your manufacturing facility. So this now becomes planes, trains, and automobiles. You really have to think about how do you package up those cells, put them on ice, and how do you get them to that one larger manufacturing facility that's no longer down the hall? The cells then go to the facility where our CAR Ts are similarly manufactured, like they'd be manufactured in a single facility. The chimeric antigen receptors are added in, and the cells are expanded and frozen. And then we have to think about getting all of the cells back and making sure the critical step is that they get back to the right patient. So suddenly you have a much bigger need for infrastructure and logistics as you start to think about expanding your trials. This is why two announcements that we've recently made are critical for our growth. The first is that our manufacturing partner is WuXi Advanced Therapeutics. And what you see there is one of the different sites that exist in the shipyards in Pennsylvania for WuXi. They have over 400,000 square feet available. The facility is there to be able to enable us to host multi-site trials and certainly to be able to grow all the way through to commercialization. On the right, you see highlighted what we would call our logistics partner, Be the Match Biotherapies. Be the Match is a group that's existed in the United States for a very long time, as they have really supported marrow donor programs. Think about that, and that's just cells moving from one place to another. Be the Match is actually supporting all of those planes, trains, and automobile logistics of how do you get the cells from one hospital back to the WuXi facility in Pennsylvania, have them manufactured there, and then get them safely returned to that patient. So really important partnerships that we've now put into place that enable us to scale our clinical trials and our manufacturing all the way through our growth, as well as through to commercialization. With Chlortoxin, the other thing that we've been focusing on in the last couple months is all of the preclinical work for expansion into metastatic melanoma. And certainly this is one of the most serious and life-threatening types of skin cancer, with over 300,000 new cases every year. You see the melanoma market size is about $6.4 billion, and it's anticipated that that market will continue to grow very significantly over the course of the next 6 or 7 years as well. I'm going to turn now and I'm going to talk about our second asset, our CDH17 CAR-T, or CHM2101. This is a novel third generation CAR-T that's come to us from world-renowned leaders in cell therapy development. And the University of Pennsylvania is globally recognized for being one of the top universities for cell therapy development. On the left, you see a picture of probably the most famous scientist and clinician at the University of Pennsylvania, Dr. Carl June. And Dr. June is widely seen as one of the people that really has ignited the cell therapy landscape. He treated one of the very first patients ever to be treated in the United States. And Dr. June has worked very closely with the gentleman on the right, who is Dr. Chinois, the actual inventor of the CDH17 CAR-T. And we're very proud of the work that they've done on our CDH17 CAR-T that was recently featured in Nature Cancer. And you can see the cover story here that was featured on Nature Cancer and the incredible amount of press that that actual preclinical publication received. It really highlighted all of the work that Dr. Hua, Dr. Fong, and Dr. June have done to develop this CAR-T therapy. And it has shown that it's able to completely eradicate tumor cells while keeping the healthy tissue safe. So this is just highlighting some of the preclinical efficacy that was seen. The CDH17 CAR-T that Dr. Hua has actually developed that we'll be now taking into clinic is the green line, where you see complete eradication of all tumor cells and no relapse. And the all-important safety that you see highlighted on the right shows that the CAR-Ts are not able to affect the healthy tissue because of the tight junctions that block it. So incredibly exciting to be able to highlight all of the preclinical work now that Dr. Hua and his team have done, and really prepare to move this into clinic. And what I'm highlighting here is our phase 1 clinical development plan. We believe this asset has such incredible promise. We're going to be looking at it in a number of gastrointestinal tumors all at the same time: neuroendocrine tumors, colorectal cancer, gastric cancer, and gastroesophageal cancer. We'll do a dose escalation to ensure that we're able to demonstrate safety for patients and find the right dose. And then we'll start to break into tumor-specific dose confirmation cohorts and dose expansion. This will really enable us to move faster towards commercialization in multiple different tumor types. So finally, let me highlight our other program, our Chimeric K platform. And this is clinically validated. It's an off-the-shelf so an allogeneic platform that utilizes NK cells. It is what I call a repeatable platform because there are an incredible number of things that we're able to build off this one platform. And we were able to highlight back about a month and a half, 2 months ago, the phase 1 clinical trial data in both blood cancers and solid tumors using this platform. And we now have multiple near-term development paths going into place. So the phase 1 clinical trial for the ChimeriC platform was done at Case Western Reserve University. And what we were able to first and foremost establish was safety. We saw no dose-limiting toxicity across the 9 patients that were treated, no cytokine release syndrome, and very importantly, no graft versus host disease. So we were able to establish that all-important phase 1 safety. We saw efficacy as well, both in blood cancers and in solid tumors. And very, very striking efficacy was shown in blood cancers. There was only 3 patients treated that had acute myeloid leukemia. All 3 patients achieved disease control, so they all had disease stability. 2 out of those 3 patients actually managed to hold that disease stability out past day 100. And what we were able to see is 1 patient who had a complete response. And we now know that complete response has been ongoing past 15 months. So really striking efficacy that we were able to see in the blood cancer patients. So this trial was really important as it really set the stage for us. We were able to establish a number of things that were really, really important. We were able to establish safety with no GVHD with universal donor cells, efficacy in both blood cancers and in solid tumors, persistence where our cells stayed around for more than 28 days, and expansion of these NK cells with large-scale manufacturing from a single donor. This really gives us all the confidence we need now to move into multiple development paths. And so we're now accelerating the development of this asset. We're taking the platform itself and looking at developing it based on what we saw with those blood cancer patients, the acute myeloid leukemia patients, for rapid development as a combination therapy. We're then building this out as a next generation platform with some further enhancements and next generation technologies. And then we're actually going to leverage our existing platforms, chimeric antigen receptors, Chlortoxin, and our CDH17 CAR to build CAR and K products. So when I talk about this, sometimes it's much easier to use an analogy to think about how we're going to move forward with our multiple development paths. So you can easily think about it in this way. The ChimeriC platform that we have right now is very much like an original Chimero. So it is classic. It is something that a lot of people still go looking for. The next thing we're going to do with it is build that next generation ChimeriC. So we're going to look for that upgrade to add some additional features to it and make it a little bit stronger and more powerful. And then we're going to add our chimeric antigen receptors. And that's when you really start to think about really souping it up and also adding a driver so that we can actually target exactly where those cells are going. So this gives you a bit of an analogy to really think about how we're going to be developing those NK cells going forward. So with all of our programs, we have some really important next steps that our team is focusing on. The phase 1 dose level 3 and 4 completion for our Chlortoxin GBM program, completing the technology transfer of the Chlortoxin CAR-T to WuXi so that we are ready from a manufacturing perspective to have capacity and capabilities to treat a lot more patients. We're going to complete our vector manufacturing for Chlortoxin, which is the important raw starting material. GBM site expansion into new sites, clinical trial sites, and completion of the melanoma IND enabling preclinical work. With our CDH17, we're preparing for a pre-IND meeting with the FDA. We're working with WuXi for their manufacturing readiness, leveraging their platform, and again, completing our vector manufacturing. We're then going to as well complete all of the IND enabling preclinical work so that we can move this asset forward into clinic as well. And then with our ChimeriC, we actually are going to look to exercise our option complete our license agreement, complete the sponsored research agreement that allows us to be able to move forward with all of the preclinical development for these assets. So with that, I thank you very much for your time and certainly invite you to contact me whether or not, whether if you have any additional questions.
Thanks, Jen. That data is definitely compelling. Just a reminder to everyone on the call that if you would like to ask a question, please do via the Q&A function. We'll get straight into it.
Yeah, Max, sorry, go ahead. I actually pulled them up. I can go through them actually if you like.
Okay, yeah, sure, please.
Sure. So I think there are a number of questions here that all are in the same vein around the ongoing progress of the Chlortoxin trial. And so as we announced, the Chlortoxin trial is currently recruiting patients in the 3rd dose level. And when that is complete and those patients have actually gone past the 28-day dose limiting toxicity point, we certainly will make an announcement when that is complete. And then we'll actually be looking to initiate the 4th dose level. And as we've said previously, we really anticipate that that trial that up to the end of dose level 4 will be completed before the end of the year. I think one of the other questions here is around CAR-T manufacturing improvements that were recently announced by the University of Pennsylvania. And that actually, the University of Pennsylvania has actually come out with a very innovative manufacturing platform where they're looking at 24-hour CAR-T manufacturing. And what I can tell you there is that certainly any and all manufacturing enhancements in this space are something that we really look at. And obviously with Penn as one of our existing partners, this is something that we are really discussing with them now and how things like that can apply to our assets and our trials. And so certainly very, very exciting innovation that Penn has brought forward again to the space. And we'll certainly let people know as we continue to explore these different things and how they could apply to our programs. And then one more question that I see here, can CAR-T manufacturing improvements recently announced by Penn help our manufacturing logistics? And so the 24 hours, really that helps patients, to be quite frank. Right now, one of the challenges with CAR-T therapies that are considered autologous or individualized, so that's when we're making the therapy for every individual patient, one of the big challenges is how long it takes. And so if you think about it, that process that I was highlighting, certainly from a patient being identified to having their blood taken and shipped off and manufactured, and that can take up to 3 to 4 weeks standard. And then it all has to be sent back and the patient brought in for infusion. For a lot of patients, from the time they start to actually the time they receive their therapy, it can be 6 to 7 weeks. And for a patient, that's a very, very long time, not only because is that disease that they're actually being treated for continuing to progress, but it's a very long time to wait when you have a very, very significant cancer. So a lot of the innovation around time and the shortening of manufacturing time certainly is very, very much patient focused. It can help the logistics depending on different ways that it's done, but you still really have to focus on being able to have the capabilities and the capacities to be able to manage multiple patients at the same time. And so some of those innovations are in very early days where it's certainly still the capabilities and the capacities are there to demonstrate proof of concept in 1 patient or 2 patients at a time, but we haven't necessarily been able to scale all of that yet. So hopefully, Max, that addresses the questions that I see here.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Just a question for myself.
Yeah.
You previously mentioned looking at different potential assets for the portfolio. Can you just sort of explain how you go about screening these prospects?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, Max. And so we're very fortunate. Our Chief Business Officer, Elliot Burke, leads a lot of that work and has great experience in this area and a PhD in cancer immunotherapy, so really helps us. There's a number of different ways, and we start from a very wide funnel looking at all types of cell therapies in oncology. And I think that's been really important for us to keep a diversified portfolio. So we look at assets that use different types of cells, so T cells, NK cells, macrophages. We use assets that are individualized or autologous, like the CAR Ts we've been talking about, but also assets that are allogeneic, or what we call off the shelf, like our NK cells. So we certainly keep a very broad focus as we start. What we're really looking for is next generation innovation with an eye to how is it going to be commercially feasible in the long term. And I think one of the things that's so important about the experience that our team has, Max, is that it's that experience that really allows us to look at some of the incredible science that's happening all over the world with a critical eye to really what should be developed, because we actually believe it's going to have a real ability to get out and help patients and be commercialized in the long run. So we sort of start with the science, and then we take it through a number of screeners and filters, and then obviously through to negotiations for those ones that we believe are really promising as we go forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer. And that concludes this morning's session.